"You'll never make a dime with that noise, Audra. It's time to grow up." That was him, my father, Sterling Thorne. Those words hit me like a physical blow every single time I remember them, even now. And believe me, I remember them. It's funny, isn't it? How a few casually cruel words tossed off by someone who should have believed in you the most can become the entire foundation of your life, shaping every single decision, every single breath from that moment on. Right now, I'm sitting in my studio. Look around. It's state-of-the-art. The soundproofing alone probably cost more than my father's first house. The mixing board looks like a spaceship console. There are awards on the shelves, gold and platinum records on the walls. My name is everywhere. Audra. Not Audra Thorne anymore, just Audra. My name earned. I'm looking at something small, something that sits on the edge of my desk, usually ignored. It's an invitation. Engraved. Heavy cardstock. The kind you only get if you're someone in that world. It's years old, but the gilt lettering still catches the light. The Thorne Family Annual Gala. And beneath it, his name. Sterling Thorne. Just seeing it, it takes me back. Takes me back to the gilded cage I grew up in, the one he built and locked me inside. Let me tell you about that cage. It wasn't built of bars, not in the way you might think. It was built of polished marble, of suffocatingly expensive carpets, of hushed voices and unspoken rules. Our house wasn't a home. It was an estate, a showpiece. Every painting was a masterpiece, every piece of furniture an antique, every conversation a transaction of status and power. And I was just another part of the display. From the moment I was old enough to sit at the grand piano in the formal living room, the one that was more a museum piece than an instrument, I felt something stir inside me. It wasn't the desire to play classical pieces perfectly, although I learned to do that because Sterling demanded it. It was something else, a need to create, to make sounds that weren't just notes on a page, but feelings, stories, raw emotion, given voice. I'd spend hours there, the afternoon light slanting through the tall windows, playing, improvising. Sometimes softly, tentatively, sometimes with a swelling crescendo that felt like my heart was bursting. That's when the interruptions would start. "Audra, stop that noise. The gardener is trying to work." "Audra, turn that down. I'm on a call." "Audra, honestly, that racket, focus on your studies. Your future doesn't lie in this. This, my music, my passion, always dismissed as noise, as racket, as a childish phase I needed to grow out of. Sterling saw the world in columns of numbers, assets and liabilities. Anything that didn't generate quantifiable wealth or enhance social standing was worthless. And music, my music, the kind that came from inside me, the kind that wasn't sanctioned classical perfection for a society performance, that was a liability, a waste of time, a distraction from the real world he was grooming me for, a world of boardrooms and balance sheets, probably in real estate like him. I tried to explain it to him once, tried to tell him how the music felt, how it was the only way I knew how to express myself, how it felt like breathing. He just looked at me with that blank, impatient look he reserved for things he considered trivial. "Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford, Audra," he'd said, his voice flat. "Thorns build empires, they don't strum guitars." My mother, Lydia, she was different, quieter, subtler. Outwardly, she deferred to Sterling. She maintained the perfect home, hosted the perfect parties, wore the perfect clothes. But sometimes, when Sterling wasn't looking, I'd catch her eye. A flicker of something there. Not defiance, never defiance. More like weary understanding. Sympathy. Sometimes, very rarely, she'd come into the music room when he was out and just sit quietly while I played. She wouldn't say much, maybe just a soft, "That was lovely, dear." But it was enough. A tiny crack in the suffocating walls of the cage, enough to keep a fragile seed of hope alive. I tried to compromise. I excelled in my studies, got into the college he approved of, majored in the subject he deemed practical. But the music never stopped. I'd write songs late at night in my room, hunched over a notebook, strumming a cheap acoustic guitar I'd bought with allowance money saved over months. I'd find quiet corners on campus practice rooms when no one was around, anywhere I could just be with my music away from his watchful eye and dismissive voice. but every visit home was a reminder, a return to the cage. And then came the annual gala, the social event of the season every season. Our house would transform into a glittering fortress of power and privilege. Limousines lined the drive, diamonds flashed under chandeliers, and the air buzzed with the low murmur of deals being struck and reputations being meticulously maintained. It was a gathering of the city's elite. The old money, the new money, trying desperately to look like old money. The power players, the socialites. The kind of people who saw the world through a very narrow, very expensive lens. People like the Vanderbilts, the Livingstons, names you'd see on foundation plaques and museum wings. I hated those parties. The forced smiles, the vapid conversations, the way everyone was weighing everyone else, calculating their worth. I was expected to be there to circulate, to be the dutiful Thorne daughter, to network, to make connections that would benefit my future serious career. I remember standing by a towering floral arrangement trying to look engaged, while a man twice my age droned on about property values in the Hamptons. A group nearby was laughing their voices, tinkling like ice in crystal glasses. Someone asked me what I was studying. I told them the approved major the one Sterling wanted. Then maybe, because I was feeling particularly stifled that night, or maybe just a moment of foolish courage, I added, "But my real passion is music. I write and play music." A sudden hush fell over the group. The laughter died down. Several pairs of eyes turned to me appraisingly, not with interest, but with a kind of cool, polite confusion. Music. A woman with a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to break her neck drawled, "Oh, how interesting." The way she said interesting made it clear it was anything but. It was a novelty, a strange quirk. Another man, a well-known financier, adjusted his tie. "Shouldn't you be focused on more practical matters, dear networking for real estate clients, building your professional contacts?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile you give a child who said something silly. "It's lovely to have hobbies, of course," a third woman added, her voice dripping with condescension. "But for someone of your background with your opportunities, surely you understand the importance of a solid career." It was subtle, yet utterly brutal. They weren't just dismissing my music. They were dismissing me for daring to pursue something they deemed frivolous, something beneath the stature of a Thorne. I felt my cheeks burn, not with embarrassment yet, but with a rising tide of indignation. I was about to try and articulate just what my music meant, to defend it, to defend myself. And then Sterling arrived. He'd been across the room talking to someone important, no doubt. He saw the cluster of people, the focus on me, and moved over, a practiced cordial smile on his face. He must have sensed the shift in atmosphere, the slight awkwardness. "Audra, dear," he said, placing a proprietorial hand on my shoulder. "Making friends." The woman with the heavy necklace smiled thinly. "Just discussing Audra's musical pursuits, Sterling. It sounds quite creative." The financier chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "We were just advising her on the virtues of focusing on something a bit more tangible." This was my chance. My father. He would see how they were treating me, how they were belittling my dreams. He would defend me, tell them my music was more than just a hobby, tell them I was more than just a potential real estate agent. Instead, he squeezed my shoulder, that same practiced smile still in place. Yes, Audra and her little hobbies," he said, his voice light, dismissive, allying himself with them. "She enjoys her piano, of course. But she's a smart girl. She understands the importance of a solid career, doesn't you, dear?" He finished with a little patronizing pat on my shoulder, his eyes meeting mine for just a split second. In that look, there was no understanding, no support, no pride, only a cool, unspoken command: "Play along. Don't embarrass me." It was like the air was sucked out of the room. The conversations resumed around me. The laughter tinkled again, but I couldn't hear it. My father. He hadn't just failed to defend me, he had actively joined in their mockery. He had reduced my deepest passion, the very core of who I was, to a little hobby. He had thrown me to the wolves, confirming to the world and to me that he saw no value in my dreams, only in the reflection they cast on him and his status. Shame washed over me, hot and stinging. Humiliation. Betrayal. I managed a weak automatic smile, muttered something about needing some air, and retreated. I walked through the glittering crowd, past the laughing faces, the clinking glasses, the oppressive weight of their judgment, and my father's dismissal. I didn't go outside. I went upstairs to my old room, the one that felt less like a sanctuary and more like a prison cell. I sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the room a stark contrast to the party downstairs. I looked down at my hands. These were the hands that knew the curve of piano keys, the bite of guitar strings, the feel of a pen scratching lyrics into paper. Hands that wanted to build something beautiful, something meaningful. But in their world, they were just hands. Hands that should be signing contracts, not making noise. The shame was still there, a bitter taste. But beneath it, something else was hardening. Something cold and sharp. It wasn't sadness. I didn't cry. The tears felt frivolous, a waste of energy. This wasn't about being sad anymore. It was about being angry. Angry at him. Angry at them. Angry at the gilded cage that was suffocating me. In that moment, looking at my hands, clenching them into fists, the decision solidified. I wasn't just going to prove them wrong by succeeding despite them. No, that wasn't enough. They had humiliated me, mocked me, betrayed me. They had shown me the true face of their world, superficial, cruel, rotten beneath the polished surface. And I was going to show them the consequences of underestimating the girl they thought was just a decorative addition to their little tableau. I was going to break free, yes, but I was also going to come back. And when I did, I wouldn't just be successful. I would be the architect of their destruction. The decision was made. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about calculated, precise revenge. The night after the gala, while the house was still recovering from the party, I made my move. I didn't pack much. A single beat-up guitar case, the one I'd bought myself, and a duffel bag with some clothes. I didn't leave a note. Didn't say goodbye to my mother, though the thought of her quiet sadness tore at me for a split second. But I knew I couldn't stay. Staying meant slowly dying, becoming the person they wanted me to be. Becoming nothing. Stepping out of that house, the heavy oak door closing quietly behind me felt like shedding a skin. A suffocating, unnecessary skin. The air outside felt different. Cooler. Cleaner. Terrifying. I was leaving behind the only world I'd ever known, the safety net of privilege, the gilded cage. I was stepping into the absolute unknown with nothing but my music and a burning cold resolve. I headed for a city far from home, a place known for its music scene, for its gritty, independent spirit. A place where people came to make art because they had to, not because it was a quaint hobby. I ended up in a tiny, overpriced walk-up apartment in a neighborhood that was 1,000,000 miles away from the manicured lawns and hushed streets of my past. The contrast was immediate and brutal. There were no staff to cater to my needs, no endless supply of money. Every single thing, every meal, every bill, every bus fare had to be earned. I took any job I could get. Working the early shift at a bustling coffee shop, the smell of stale coffee and burnt sugar ingrained in my clothes. Cleaning studios late at night, scrubbing floors, emptying ashtrays, listening to the echoes of other people's music, wondering if mine would ever make it out there. Busking on street corners with my guitar, hoping anyone would stop and listen for more than a few seconds, maybe drop $1 or $2 into the open case. The struggle was constant, grinding, exhausting, humiliating in a different way than the gala had been. This was the humiliation of being ignored, of being invisible, of having to fight for scraps. I was surrounded by other hopefuls, all with their own dreams, their own struggles. The music scene wasn't a welcoming, supportive family. It was a brutal, competitive ecosystem. Open mic nights were soul-crushing. Playing to a room of people talking over you, waiting for their own turn, utterly indifferent to yours. Rejections from clubs were frequent and blunt. Not the right sound. Don't have an opening. Come back when you have a following. There were nights I'd curl up in my tiny apartment, the city noise outside a constant roar, and just feel the weight of it all. The loneliness was a physical ache. No familiar faces, no easy comfort, no one to turn to. I thought about giving up. Thought about calling Sterling, admitting defeat, crawling back to the cage. The thought was poisonous, and it spurred me on. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. So I poured it all into my music. The pain, the anger, the loneliness, the burning injustice of that night, the dismissal, the betrayal. Every chord, every lyric was fueled by that fire. I wrote songs about feeling trapped, about shattered dreams, about the masks people wear, about the hollowness of a life built on appearances. My music became my shield, my weapon, my only solace. I practiced relentlessly. After long shifts at the coffee shop with aching feet, I'd sit with my guitar until my fingers bled. After cleaning studios until 3 a.m., I'd stumble home and work on lyrics, melodies, arrangements. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when there was so much to say, so much to create, so much to prove. Slowly, painfully, things started to shift. It wasn't a sudden explosion of fame, nothing like you see in the movies. It was small, incremental victories. A sound engineer at a studio I cleaned noticed me humming a melody and asked me to play it. He liked it, gave me some tips. A fellow busker introduced me to a small, independent venue owner who was looking for new acts. My first paid gig at that tiny club felt like playing Madison Square Garden. The room wasn't packed, maybe 30 people. They weren't the high society crowd of the gala. They were diverse, real people. Some were just there for a drink, but others listened. I played a song I had written shortly after leaving home, a raw, vulnerable piece about feeling invisible and unheard. As I sang, I looked out at the faces, and for the first time, I saw a connection. A few people nodded along. Someone in the back closed their eyes. When the last note faded, there wasn't just polite applause. There was genuine clapping. Someone cheered. A few people came up to me afterwards awkwardly to tell me the song had touched them. It was small. So small. But it was everything. It was proof. Proof that my music wasn't just noise. Proof that it could connect, could move people. Proof that I could build something real, something meaningful outside of Sterling's world, outside of their judgment. I sold a handful of burned CDs that night, held the crumpled dollars in my hand. It wasn't a dime compared to what Sterling measured success by, but it was my dime. Earned. Validating. The absence of my family, of that old life, was still a constant dull ache. It was the price of freedom, I told myself, a necessary amputation. But in that moment, standing on that tiny stage, holding those few dollars, I knew I hadn't just escaped. I had found a path. And that path, forged in struggle and fueled by defiance, was taking me somewhere they could never follow, not unless I wanted them to. And believe me, I had a plan for that. Years blurred together after that first breakthrough. The grind didn't stop, but the direction changed. The small club gigs led to slightly bigger ones. Local radio stations started playing my music. An independent label picked me up, then a larger one. The audiences grew. The venues got bigger. Tours crisscrossed the country. Critics wrote about the raw emotion, the brutal honesty, the storytelling in my songs. They called it authentic, powerful, healing. The very things Sterling and his world dismissed as worthless sentimentality. I changed too. The shy, stifled girl faded away, replaced by someone harder, more confident, more focused. Success hadn't softened me. It had honed me. The anger was still there, a cold ember glowing beneath the surface, waiting. I learned the business, not just the art. I built a team, a shrewd manager, a sharp lawyer, dedicated publicists. I learned to navigate the spotlight, to protect my privacy, to control my narrative. I became respected, powerful, in my own right, a force. And all the while, in the quiet corners of my life, the plan was taking shape. The revenge. It wasn't about petty humiliation. It was about dismantling their carefully constructed world brick by gilded brick. It was about exposing the rot beneath the polish. I didn't do it myself, not the actual digging. My network grew with my success. I hired the best, a private investigator, a forensic accountant, a tech specialist. I gave them names. The names of the people who had mocked me at the gala. The Vanderbilts, the Livingstons, and yes, Sterling Thorne himself. I told them I wanted everything. Their financial dealings, their indiscretions, their secrets, every skeleton in every expensive closet. It was like assembling a bomb piece by piece. Ledgers detailing fraudulent transactions disguised as legitimate investments, offshore accounts hidden from the tax man, encrypted messages revealing insider trading schemes, stolen glances caught on camera proving long-denied affairs, records of astronomical gambling debts that could sink families, evidence of backroom deals and outright corruption. It turned out the veneer of respectability in their world was thinner than cheap paint. As the information came in, I felt a strange detachment. It wasn't personal anymore, not in the emotional hurt girl way. It was strategic. Each piece of evidence was a pin ready to burst a balloon of carefully guarded lies. I learned about their weaknesses, their hypocrisies, the double lives they led while judging others. They preached morality and virtue while practicing deceit and betrayal behind closed doors. 3 years after I'd left, the call came. My assistant put it through. Sterling Thorne. His voice was hesitant, almost polite. Gone was the booming, dismissive tone. Audra, it's your father. I said nothing for a moment, just let the silence hang there. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, it was almost funny. Audra, I was wondering if you might consider, well, the annual gala is coming up, and things haven't been quite the same. Attendances are down, sponsorships are challenging. He cleared his throat. Your name, your success. It's truly remarkable, Audra. We've followed your career with interest. Interest. The word tasted like ash on my tongue. We thought, he continued, clearly steeling himself, that perhaps you might consider attending, perhaps even performing. It would be a tremendous draw. A great benefit to the foundation. He needed me, needed my name, my success. The noise I made was now valuable, a commodity he could leverage. The irony was so thick I could almost choke on it. My voice was calm, measured, utterly devoid of warmth. The gala. Yes, I remember it well. A slight pause. Yes, well, water under the bridge, isn't it? So what do you say? Will you come home? Home. The word felt alien. That place wasn't home. It was where I'd been broken. But his request, his need aligned perfectly with the final stage of my plan. The bomb was built. I just needed the right place and time to detonate it. His gala was the perfect stage, the ultimate audience. Yes, Father, I said, my voice soft, almost sweet. I'll come home, and I'll perform for you. I could hear the relief in his voice. He rambled for a few more minutes about arrangements, seating how wonderful this would be. I just listened, picturing his face, the comfortable arrogance that must still be there beneath the veneer of politeness. He had no idea, not the slightest clue what was coming. Preparing for my return wasn't like packing for a trip. It felt like preparing for battle. I briefed my team, the logistics of getting the evidence displayed discreetly, coordinating with the authorities. I wanted arrests, not just gossip, ensuring security. Every detail was meticulously planned. I wasn't returning as the prodigal daughter hoping for acceptance. I was returning as a force of nature, focused and cold, ready to unleash a storm. Days before the event, I arrived back in the city. I didn't go to the house. I stayed in a hotel suite high above the streets, looking down. I could see the familiar skyline, the wealthy enclaves, the towers that house their empires, built on secrets and lies. It looked different now, smaller, less intimidating. I wasn't looking up at it anymore. I was looking down, waiting. The night of the gala arrived. The air was crisp, the sky clear. Limousines once again lined the drive of the Thorne estate. Valets in crisp uniforms opened doors for women in glittering gowns and men in sharp tuxedos. The sounds of polite laughter and clinking glasses drifted out from the open doors. It was exactly as I remembered it. The gilded cage polished to perfection. I arrived late deliberately. My car pulled up, not a limo, but a sleek black SUV. My team was already inside in place. I stepped out wearing a dress that wasn't just expensive, it was armor. Elegant, powerful, utterly unlike the timid gowns I wore as a girl. My hair was styled, my makeup flawless. I wasn't Audra Thorne, the girl who had been dismissed. I was Audra, the artist, the architect, the one who had come to collect. As I walked through the entrance, a hush fell over the nearest conversations. Heads turned. People recognized me, the famous musician. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Is that Audra Thorne? Sterling's daughter. Good heavens, look at her. They hadn't seen me in years. To them, I was still that awkward girl, the one with the little hobby. Their eyes widened as they took in the woman I had become. The confidence, the power, the sheer unlikability to them of someone who had carved their own path so spectacularly. I saw the faces of the mockers, the woman with the heavy necklace looking startled, the financier, his practiced smile faltering. Others from that night, their expressions a mixture of surprise, confusion, and perhaps a flicker of unease. Sterling was across the room holding court. He saw me. His smile stretched maybe a little too wide. He began making his way towards me, ready to play the proud father welcoming home his famous daughter. But before he could reach me, the host for the evening, a smooth, well-known social figure named Julian, took the stage at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice amplified just enough, "we have a very special, very exciting surprise for you tonight. We are absolutely thrilled and honored to present a performance by an artist you all know, a true star who has captivated the world with her talent. Please give a warm welcome to the incredibly gifted Audra." A ripple of applause went through the room, genuine applause from most people who just knew me as the artist. But in the center, among Sterling and the mockers, there was a different kind of silence, a stunned, uneasy quiet. Sterling froze mid-stride, his mouth slightly open. The mockers stared, their faces pale beneath the glittering chandeliers. I walked past Sterling without a glance, my eyes fixed on the stage. I climbed the steps, took the microphone from Julian, and stood there for a moment, looking out at the faces. Faces that had once judged me, dismissed me, betrayed me. They were all here, trapped in the cage with me. The musicians I had brought with me were ready. I nodded, and the opening notes of my final song filled the room. It wasn't one of my well-known hits. It was a new song written specifically for this night. The lyrics were sharp-cutting, woven with veiled allusions to hypocrisy, hidden truths, and the fragile nature of reputations built on lies. My voice was strong, clear, filled with years of suppressed pain and newfound power. I sang about cages, about masks, about the cost of silence. I sang about eyes that didn't see and ears that didn't hear. I sang directly to them the lyrics, a private language of accusation. When the last chord faded, the silence that followed was absolute, heavy with unspoken tension. I didn't bow. I didn't smile. I just stood there, the microphone still in my hand, looking out at the stunned faces. Sterling was rigid, his eyes fixed on me, a dawning comprehension starting to form in his gaze. The mockers looked terrified. Then I spoke. My voice was calm, quiet, but amplified so everyone could hear. It cut through the silence like a laser. "Thank you for that," I said, my eyes sweeping over the crowd. "It's good to be home." I paused, letting that sink in. "You know," I continued, my voice taking on a conversational yet chillingly precise tone. "When I was a young woman just starting out, passionate about my music, I was told it was noise. I was told I should focus on something tangible, something that would make a dime. I was told that sentimentality was a luxury and that thorns build empires, they don't strum guitars." My gaze settled on Sterling. He flinched almost imperceptibly. "I was also told," I went on, turning my attention to the group of mockers, "that my dreams were just a little hobby, that someone of my background should know better than to pursue something so interesting." I used their own words, throwing them back at them like stones. Their faces were ashen. They shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. "Well," I said, my voice hardening slightly, "it seems my little hobby turned out to be quite tangible. It built an empire. It made more than a dime. I gestured around the opulent room. In fact, it allowed me the means to learn some rather interesting things about the people in this room, things you all desperately tried to keep hidden beneath your polished facades. A murmur went through the crowd. People looked at each other, nervous, uncertain. For example, I continued stepping forward slightly, and the large screens on either side of the stage, previously showing abstract art, suddenly flickered to life. Let's take Mr. Harrison Vanderbilt. His face frozen in a look of stunned horror appeared on the screens. His frequent business trips to the Cayman Islands weren't solely for financial planning, as it turns out. The properties he was investing in seemed to have been used for, shall we say, rather illicit activities, and his companion on those trips was rarely his wife, Mrs. Vanderbilt, who I believe is here tonight. A gasp went through the crowd. Mrs. Vanderbilt shrieked, turning on her husband, who was sputtering, his face purple. Or, how about Mr. Thomas Livingston? His face appeared. Known for his stringent moralizing in public, less so in private. Our investigation uncovered evidence of significant gambling debts funded, I regret to inform his investors, by diverting funds from the very foundation this gala is meant to support. Chaos began to erupt. People were shouting, pointing. Spouses were confronting each other. Business partners were exchanging furious whispers. The air was thick with sudden, explosive betrayal. And then there are the countless examples of financial fraud, insider trading, bribery, and infidelity among this esteemed group. I said, my voice rising slightly above the din, but remaining utterly calm. It seems the real world isn't quite as clean and respectable as you like to pretend. You built your empires on lies, deceit, and the ruin of others. You judged me for pursuing my passion honestly, while your own lives were rotten to the core. Then on the screens appeared a montage of images, documents, spreadsheets, embarrassing photographs, screenshots of incriminating messages. The evidence was undeniable, damning. Just as the panic reached a fever pitch, the doors at the back of the room burst open. Uniformed police officers streamed in, followed by detectives. My team had timed it perfectly. "Harrison Vanderbilt, you are under arrest," an officer announced, moving towards him. "Thomas Livingston, you too." Names were called out one after another. The people who had mocked me along with others I had gathered dirt on over the years. Their faces contorted in shock, disbelief, rage, and fear. They were handcuffed, led away through the stunned, parting crowd, their carefully constructed lives crumbling around them in full public view. The room was a tableau of utter devastation. People crying, shouting, trying to leave, blocked by the police. Reputations were shattered in seconds. Marriages imploded. Business deals evaporated. The gilded cage wasn't just cracked, it was collapsing. I stood on the stage, the eye of the hurricane, watching it all unfold. The woman with the heavy necklace was being comforted by friends, but her eyes were on her husband being led away. The financier was arguing frantically with a detective. The air was no longer filled with polite chatter, but with accusations, sobs, and the cold click of handcuffs. And then I looked at Sterling. He hadn't been called out by name for arrest, not tonight. His downfall was different. He stood alone apart from the chaos, his face a mask of absolute horror. His empire wasn't built on the same kind of explicit fraud as some of the others, but his world, his reputation, the very foundation of his identity, being a respected, powerful Thorne, was in ruins. His guests, his peers, the people he courted and controlled, were being hauled away. His legacy was tarnished beyond repair by the sheer scale of the corruption exposed under his roof at his event by his daughter. He looked at me on the stage, the girl he called a disappointment, the girl whose dreams he had crushed, the girl he had mocked in front of his peers. He saw not a victim, but the architect. He saw the cold, hard woman I had become, and he knew in that terrible moment that I had done this, that I had waited, built my own power, and returned to dismantle everything he valued. His face crumpled not with sadness, but with a crushing, devastating realization of his own ruin brought about by the noise he had dismissed. There was a sense of grim satisfaction watching their world burn. It was the culmination of years of pain struggle and meticulous planning. They got what they deserved. But standing there, amidst the wreckage, there was also a strange emptiness. This path had led to power, to freedom, to justice served, but it had also incinerated every bridge back to my past, including the fragile connection, however flawed to my mother, to the ghost of a family I might have had. The revenge was complete. The cost was absolute. The memory fades. The chaotic sounds of the gala recede, replaced by the hum of modern equipment in my studio. I'm back here in the present. Years have passed since that night. The scandals rocked the city, made national headlines. Arrests followed, trials, reputations never recovered. Sterling. He withdrew from public life. The Thorne name still exists, but it no longer carries the weight of undisputed power. I look down at the engraved invitation again. The gilt lettering, the heavy cardstock. It feels like an artifact from a different life, a different century. I turn it over in my hand, then place it face down on the desk. It holds no power over me anymore. I'm still Audra, still making music. My music has grown deepened. It's still honest, still raw, but perhaps less defined by the anger now. The fire is still there, but it's controlled, used for creation, not just destruction. I escaped the cage. I built my own world, a world where my voice is heard, where my music is valued, where I am free. I turn away from the desk, from the ghost of that past life. I walk over to my keyboard, my production desk. My fingers hover over the keys. The struggle was real, the pain was deep, and the revenge was absolute. But the story doesn't end there. It wasn't just about tearing them down. It was about building myself up. My hands, the same hands that were once dismissed, rest on the keys. I close my eyes for a moment, breathe in the quiet, controlled air of my studio. Then I begin to play. A new melody, a sound that is entirely mine, free, powerful, and finally, truly heard. How do you find today's story? Leave a comment below. If you like this video, please like and share. Especially don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our interesting and exciting stories.